Hey, let's take a look.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, can you hear me?
Good evening.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you just
Good
fine.
evening.
So the debate was between you and
Good
Doe.
morning.
I don't want to rehash its entirety here, but you had thoughts to share, and Doe consented to your presence without it. So I'm happy to hear you out for a time. What do you have on your mind?
Yeah, no problem. And thank you for having me on. I guess I want to address some of the things because I don't feel, I guess like the main thing right now for me is that I feel like people are not listening to what I'm saying or engaging with what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel really hurt by the fact that I feel like people are not listening to me, despite the fact I am genuinely, regardless of whether or not you believe me, trying to the best of my ability to engage with you or the perspectives of people who disagree with me. So I want to go through like a couple points to begin with, and just like I know that you said I was hardcore logical tunneling. I know that that's something that you.
Well, I think you have lawyer brain, at least selectively,
Well,
with certain degrees of specificity, but it didn't last very long in the conversation, I don't think.
well, the reason I'm very particular with my
Petition
wording.
to make all people stop playing this dog shit game. I said it. It's a dog shit game. Stop playing it. Play Path of
I try to
Exile.
be very particular. I try to think through
Play
my
Path of
positions, and
Exile.
I try to think through the outcomes of my different positions. And so the reason why I stick to very particular wording is because it is important for the purposes of
You're so mad. You're so mad.
the fundamental issue in this conversation. So in this conversation, the thing that we started with was the question of, did I ever call Doe a pedophile? That was the bottom line question of the debate. All right?
Yes, though I don't think it is anymore, because I think most people would argue that at this point you've now done worse things than call it a pedophile. It sort of
Worse
very
things?
directly.
What worse?
Well,
and that's just sort of like the initiating concern. Now.
Can we talk through some of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Indirectly, yeah. Okay. Indirectly saying that this happened is massively different than directly doing this. We need to reserve the ability to be able to say that people are making indirect comments about pedophilia. Otherwise, we're just fucking lost. If I cannot make a claim that somebody is tacitly endorsing pedophilia, then without like people saying, well, this person's just calling you a pedophile, then we're lost. We're absolutely fucking lost. This is not a good critique. If you want to have a critique of Riley, actually have some of the shit on the substance of the argument, not this weird fucking shit where we're not allowed to say that you're tacitly endorsing or you're making arguments that could be sympathetic to pedophilia. Like that's wild. That's wild.
Absolutely.
Okay.
People would ignore it and harass the. Listen, that's your responsibility. Hold on, that's your responsibility to disseminate. My bad. To disseminate good information and shit like that. That's your responsibility to prevent your audience from feeling that's an okay thing to do. That's your responsibility, right? That's your responsibility to do that. But I absolutely think we need to reserve the right to be able to say that you can do that.
And then build back, if that's fine, with the personal comments towards the end with Doe.
Yeah.
So when Doe
that's what I would
said
say.
that, and I was told that this was a possibility beforehand.
Replace the word pedophilia with fascist, and I guarantee Vaush's opinion would flip. It would. That's the problem. Your opinions are supporting fascism. I'm not saying that you are a fascist yourself, but I'm saying your opinions support fascism. What the fuck? I thought we couldn't do this anymore. What happened? Is it wrong because it's pedophilia? Is that why it's wrong? Jesus Christ.
Suspicious that Doe would bring up their past experience as a trauma victim, right?
Who's the guest, Riley?
And that is like everything that happened to them in respect to that is horrible and awful. And I do not disagree with that, right? The problem is whether or not it was relevant to the conversation that we were having. And I think that it caught me by surprise. So I think to an extent, like the answer I gave makes sense, but I reflected on it more with my chat. And the reason why it was not relevant, and this is why I would say it's more so poisoning the well, that it didn't actually have to do with the conversation, is because the thing that Doe was describing, like the person in that situation was not doing an action, right? They were standing and they were contemplating, but for me, I would not just say that a sex act is just thinking. And we can get into this if we want to, because this is something that and this is a big reason why I arrive at my position, right? But like when we try to conceive of what exactly a sex act is, I think that the best definition that we can arrive at is when someone is doing something with the specific intention of primarily appealing to a sexual desire or taste. I think that is the best definition, and that's what a lot of the debate was sort of about defending, right?
Right.
And
well, a couple of things.
And then you can talk. But so here, the person who they were describing was not. I would say they weren't doing an action, right? But the point being that like, so here, the main issue is that I just want to know what an alternative definition is to sexual act. That's not what I'm proposing. That doesn't otherwise lead to really bad outcomes.
I think Doe's whole point is that your insistence on reducing all sexual actions down to a single all-encompassing term is unhelpful. That's the reason why it brought that up to begin with. Your definition of sex act includes dressing for the club if you're looking to arouse people with your fat tits, and doesn't include leering at a child who you may or may not purchase for sexual acts. That seems to me like an wait. Okay. That seems to me like a very unhelpful definition of sex acts. So maybe it would be better to consider multiple terms that we could fold different types of behavior into. Maybe the term sex act isn't really what we're looking.
I hate people so much. Very simple. Ask RGR to define sex act that does not include the aforementioned case with Doe and dressing in a sexually provocative manner for the club. That's all you have to do. What a shocker. What a shocker. That's all you got to do. Just ask RGR, can you just make this example work for me? That's it. That's it. God, I hate. Why are people such losers?
Looking for? Maybe we're talking about harm, implicitly or explicitly, and sex act is something which sometimes but not always overlaps with that. Like, for example, the people dressing. You did say in that debate with Doe that you felt like dressing with the intent of arousing people in public was a violation of others' consent, around children's consent.
That's not.
Is that not true?
No, I wouldn't make that argument. So, or rather, if I did, that's not what I intended to convey. Again, the thing I focus on is whether or not you're doing something primarily, emphasis on primarily, in order to appeal to a sexual desire or taste.
People do that with their clothing, don't they? There are absolutely people who like when you're going out to the club, there are people who dress. I mean, there are girls out there dressing in ways that have their only consideration is looking sexy and fitting within the boundaries of the law, and that's pretty.
Okay. The incels run wild. Incels rise up. Women are just doing it for men after all, right? Incels or women are just doing everything for men after all, right? Here it is. Vaush is saying it. Vaush is saying it. Women do this shit just for us. That's what he's saying. You heard it here first. Our time is now. No, fuck out of here with this shit, man. Fuck out. This isn't even the take. Why would you do this? This isn't even the take.
Pretty much it. I would say that's primarily an effort to elicit sexual desire.
I disagree, though. I would say that people who do that dress for any number of other reasons aside from trying to elicit sexual desire. Like when I go out to, like when I dress up, I'm not dressing up because I'm trying to like appeal to someone's sexual desire. I usually pick what I wear because it makes me personally happy.
But we're not talking about you. We're talking about some people. There are people for whom it is certainly the primary concern. I don't go.
So, this is the 1 IQ take. Let me give you at the very least, the 2 IQ take. I know we're doubling it. Often, those people who are doing it for sexual arousal or what have you are doing it because they want to themselves, not just explicitly, so that way other people can be sexually attracted to them because they want validation or what have you. That's the reason why, right? That is primarily the reason. It's not like, hey, I just want to look sexy. Why? Just cause. No, it's because you want to look sexy because you want to feel validated. You want to feel this. You want to feel that. You want to do what X, Y, and Z. And that's who you are as a person. That's who you are as a person. It's a multifaceted thing. People don't just do it for no reason. They do it for a reason because they want to feel something themselves that they believe is a positive and poggers thing. It's a reason why people do it, right? I don't know. This is rather bizarre.
Go out dressing primarily. I wear shorts and t-shirts, but I know there are people who will go on out there trying to look as sexually enticing as they can.
But I would contest that then, because I would think that the only example where this realistically comes up, and maybe I needed to press this more in the debate, I think that the only time where this...
I think you were being
like,
a bit bad faith here. How? How is this bad faith at all? How is this bad faith at all? In any way, shape, or form? How?
Primarily for sexual desires or tastes is like when you're wearing like a gimp suit and you're using that to like get off.
I honestly...
It's very obvious that that's what she means. It's incredibly obvious. Let's see how Vaush reacts to this.
I think you're only saying that because the alternative would be acknowledging how unworkable your definition is. There are...
What? This isn't even a response. I think the reason why Vaush even believes in any kind of logical framework is because without it, he would realize how stupid his system is. Yeah? That's how systems work?
Absolutely.
Yes, I make my system the way it is because if it's not that way, it falls apart. Yeah.
Who dress in ways which complies with public decency guidelines, but is also primarily about sexual arousal. Like, now, of course, you now faced with that, you have 2 possible responses, which is either you call everyone who's ever dressed for the club a pedophile, or unintentionally enabling pedophilia, or you try and find a way in which the act of dressing to arouse other people while just barely skirting decency laws is somehow not a primarily sexual act. The fact that your first resort was to describe your intentions suggests to me that this is, well, I mean, you have to say something here, or you would have to change your definition, wouldn't you?
I mean, the difference is that what you're describing right now are not instances when people are wearing things primarily for sexual desires or interests. It sounds like that may be an element of it, but I would not say that's the primary purpose in those situations.
How do you quantify that exactly?
The funny part is he's putting her to the iron on this one, but he himself made a similar claim. He made the claim that there are some women that dress primarily the way that they do, primarily for sexual arousal. How does he know that? How does he know that? How does he know that? Because he's making a similar claim. Why wouldn't he have to prove this as well? How does he know?
Usually it's going to, well, I mean, so this gets back to like the distinction between like ontology,
because there
epistemology.
But the point is he's compelling her to do the same thing that he would have to do. You fucking dumb fucks.
Ethics, so like, you know, how do we actually tell when people are engaging in a sexual act well, usually we're going to go.
Vaush pointed out to the existence of some people who might be dressing up to appeal sexually to other people. This does not mean that all people who dress up have this goal or that they do it all the time. That's how I look at it, but may have missed something. I don't disagree with that. However, I would say that it's often when people do that, it's as a result of them developing some kind of idea or sense of themselves that says that that's poggers. It's not just a one-dimensional thing, right? It's like it's the makeup example. I mean, the Jordan Peterson meme. Why do women wear makeup in the workplace? I imagine it's not just to impress men or anything like that. It's a multifaceted thing. It's multifaceted. Right? There even of the people whose massively by and large has to do with like oppressing men, there's an internal reason why, because they want validation or something, and the way that they are getting that is through validation for men, and the way that they're doing that, the apparatus is makeup. It's not just I want to impress men. I want men to like me. It's that, well, I want men to like me because the validation of whatever, right? So on and so forth, and the reason behind that, and the reason behind that. I would expect somebody that got into the nuances of why everybody who's monogamous is an insecure fuck, right? Would probably get into the nuances of this topic, but I guess not.
Of available evidence.
What if they just tell you the reason they're doing it is to sexually arouse?
Would you say it's one-dimensional? The kink stuff that...
have you ever been to like a slutty Halloween costume party?
Like, I mean, if you're talking about like her position on potentially wearing sexually promiscuous shit, then yeah, no. I would say her kink stuff specifically, and you should use her word specifically, no, is not one-dimensional.
You can ask them. They're doing it to sexually arouse people. You can just directly ask them. They will tell you. There's no need to fuss about with it. They will just say it very directly.
All right, hold on. Maybe I'm not asking the right questions. So let me ask you then, all right? Because maybe this can help you understand at least my perspective better. Because I'm just what I want is for people to just understand this perspective. So what would you define as a sexual act?
I honestly think it's stupid to even try.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no, dude. Oh, God, dude.
I mean, I genuinely think that human sexuality is complicated enough that a term to encompass the entirety of acts that would fit within its purview would be subjective and almost impossible to like I could come up with one and another person could come up with a very different one, and I don't know if I could say there's any worse than mine or better. But if I had to come up with
you absolutely could.
Like a quick definition.
I understand his position that we wouldn't be able to come up with a full encompassing thing. But if this was true, you would need to substantiate why Riley's is bad.
Definition, like, I don't know, an act which pertains in some way to one or another's sexual desire or arousal. Like an act which is related in some way to your or another's sexual desires.
Okay, all right, so we don't sound very different.
That sounds identical to RGR's. Did I get something? That literally sounds identical to RGR's, no?
Right, but I believe kissing near children is okay.
Right, but I wouldn't say that kissing is always like primarily done for sexual reasons.
No, you just changed the definition. I said any act which relates to sexual desire. And I promise you, I'm not alone in believing that making out with somebody, even a quick peck sometimes, depending on how pent up you are, that's life, absolutely pertains to sexual desire. And I think you can do that in front of kids. I mean, if you couldn't kiss in front of kids, it's all over.
Pertains to sexual desire? Does it have to?
Sure, but in this instance, so this gets into all right, how do we arrive at better definitions, right? Because to an extent,
I was gonna say, if we're being that broad with the scope, then would hugging then apply? Hugging would apply then. There's people that hug people so that way they can feel the booba on their chest. Can I not? So therefore, would hugging be a sexual act? And if hugging is a sexual act, can I not hug my kid?
I can agree that we're focusing on we can have a wide range of different possible things. And usually it's going to relate to sexual desires or interests. Like, I'm with you on that. But then you introduce an issue where
No
it's like,
hugging.
okay,
Feels weird, man.
sometimes we need to be able
No
to make
hugging.
differentiations, because I would agree
What do
with
you
you that,
mean?
like, yeah,
Touch
like
kids.
if you give someone a peck in public, then that's not something that we should call like pedophilia, or that's not something we should call a public sex act.
But you
Which is why I
refused
focus on
distinctions with
primary.
Doe.
Well, I mean, we can like dialogue back and forth and figure out a better definition, right? And the
Well-
problem that I have is that like people keep looking at me like, oh, Riley, you present a really like outlandish, crazy definition, but I have yet for someone to present me with a better one. And I feel like this is important for us to talk about and for us to have a clear and concise rule on, because we want to be able to have moral rules about when someone is violating someone else's consent in respect to sexual acts.
But a single
Like, that's
term
very
won't be able to
important to me.
encompass that, because kissing is a sexual act. I mean, often at least, absolutely. But we can do that in front of kids. That's fine. I think it's kind of weird if you're like looking for groups of kids to make out in front of. Like Doe said, it seems there that the intent to involve children is quite a bit worse than children being incidentally around. Because everyone's kissed near kids. I mean, at least I think most of us have. But you were insistent on avoiding specificity with definitions with Doe, or you only wanted one. I mean, you wanted sex act. Well, I've defined sex act for you, and I have just described to you a sex act which we conduct freely in public. So your insistence that sex acts done in public violate the consent
The issue
of
is that
others
for
by the
some,
category
dressing
you have
sexual will be
agreed
seen
to,
as a sexual act or
with
for
my
an invitation for
definition
it, but you can define it away. You could make definitions that don't apply to the colloquial or what most people intuitively appeal to.
false.
Yeah, but then, all right, so then we have to get into the issue of evaluating the strength and the utility, as I know that you understand that, like, words, social constructs, we generally are going to advocate for meanings of words which give us greater or lower utility, right? Are you on board with me with that?
Yeah, I like utility. But you're a Kantian, aren't you? Of what relevance is that to you?
Well, I mean, like, with language, we can be able to look at like the meanings of words and make those kinds of evaluations.
Right.
So here, we can look at two different definitions of what sex acts are, and we can be able to go through applications of those and be able to derive whether or not they lead to outcomes which we feel are morally sound or justifiable. And so that's the whole point of going through these scenarios. So, like, if you give me a rule for what is a sex act, and then you turn around and you say, or I don't want to say, sorry, that's loaded language, but then you demonstrate the limitations of that rule, you demonstrate the limitations of that definition, then I would say, okay, so now we can look at a different rule, or we can adjust that so we can be able to account for the issues with that kind of rule, right?
Right, I would agree. And I think that whatever exemptions you would make would well include what Doe was talking about in the conversation. Going barefoot in a park where kids might be, when you have a foot fetishist partner. I cannot imagine that as a violation of anyone's consent. Because to everyone around you, they're just seeing a person whose feet are out.
Okay, then if this is the case, then if this is your primary apparatus, RGR should push back with the, like, what if you get off on the idea of people being around and then you go to, like, a child's playground where there's a bunch of kids around? And you're not getting off explicitly because they're kids, but you're getting off to the idea of being looked at, but you're being looked at by kids. This is something that she should address to Vaush if this is his primary reason for the previous thing. Because still, even in that scenario, the kids are just like, that's weird. That person's just walking around with their shoes off. It's kind of weird. That's all that they're perceiving. Right? So if the perception is the key issue, then you can push him on this and be able to see where he goes on that. That's something that RGR could go with, possibly.
But I mean, like, to be clear, I've agreed with Doe's perspective on this. So I mean, now apparently, it and I are both unintentionally promoting pedophilia. So, I think that's ludicrous, and I'll be more specific. I think it's so ostentatious that it borders on bad faith, and it's an attempt at you
I would agree with that
pedojacketing
one,
as a way of legitimizing
a broken toilet.
emotional discomfort you have with sexuality. That's the feeling I have. Like, it's so outlandish that the best explanation I can think of is that you're just generally uncomfortable with sexuality, and you're looking for the harshest condemnation you can find for people to avoid really confronting your perspective. And this is it. And you found it. And it ended with you essentially invalidating the child sexual exploitation of a CSA survivor. Clearly, this is not an effective road.
Wait, what? Wait, how did they invalidate that?
There has to be a better...
Wait. I understand if you say that, like, RGR didn't have, like, any good points in that debate, whatever. But to say that she invalidated the child sexual assault of of Doe there is wild. That is phenomenally out of line. In what way was that the case? It was not relevant to this scenario. They could have kept with analogies, and it did absolutely feel like it was a shutting down of the conversation, because any attempt to be able to divorce the conversation from that specific topic would be seen as trying to dodge or mitigate, or, by his words, downplay or mitigate the harm that was done. Like, Vaush fell right into the trap. He did. You bring up some real-world scenario that happened with you that may not be relevant, and it doesn't matter, because if the person's like, this isn't relevant, you just claim that they're downplaying your trauma, and then you win. That's the issue, and he fell right for it.
A better attitude to be taking towards this.
So I would say I disagree with, I think, all of that. But we can go through each step individually.
He's going based on RGR saying he wasn't doing a sex act, or
part was wrong.
Browsing.
I mean, I think that, like, the speculating to my
RGR is
mindset
disagreeing that a sex act was done.
Wrong and unfounded. Like, I don't think that
I
you know
brought that up.
anything
That's
about
not
me
relevant.
or my
That's still
motivations
not
or why I say the
invalidating.
things that I do.
You can't
No,
control.
of course
That's
it's
still
an
not
inference.
invalidating.
I mean,
and to make a claim, this is not a light claim that you make. The claim that somebody is invalidating sexual assault, especially child sexual assault of another person, is a amazing, phenomenal claim that needs mountains of evidence to be able to substantiate, because that is a huge moral condemnation if somebody was to make such that. And offhandedly saying it because of that is fucking ludicrous. That is fucking psychotic, is to say something like that.
That's what we have to make, don't we? I mean, we have to infer people's behavior sometimes. And when it comes to arguments like this, I cannot imagine a person as intelligent as you would sincerely be making this argument as a component of some broader opposition to child sexual abuse, because that's not what it is. I mean, exempting some head injury, I mean, there has to be some other underlying motivation. So I reach, and I have to infer, you know.
Do you think, well, hold on, like, do you think
why
that
do we
it could
care?
not just be the case that I really care about protecting consent?
I think this is an extraordinarily bad way of doing it, if that's the case. But
okay, it's not that extraordinary. All right? Listen, if he can say everybody who's monogamous is insecure, I'm pretty sure that RGR could have not a great take about consent. I'm pretty sure that's something that can happen. That she could have a take on consent that isn't like what we would consider as morally consistent. She can have a kind of bad take on the consent, but, if Vaush is able to have a take on monogamy that says that everybody who's monogamous is insecure, all right? So, like, let's fucking back off of that a minute.
if you do, I mean, I guess sometimes.
Yeah, if anything, well, yeah, I think she is. I think she's being too broad with consent, is trying to protect it too much and, like, applying it to too many scenarios. Like, I've been outspoken that I disagree with RGR on some of the things that she said, and a multitude of the things that she said. But I'm not going to say that she was invalidating child sexual assault. What a fucking stupid claim.
Not what counts, you know?
Okay, so
Joe would hate this? Yeah, Joe would be cringing.
Just the fact that, so let's go back to, you said a lot of things earlier. I want to go through them one by one. So you said that you agree with Doe that going out with your foot fetishist partner in public without shoes around children would make you a pedophile. Do you think that's what my position is?
How about you tell me what your position is on people who would go barefoot in public around their foot fetishist partner?
So with the way that you described it to me, that I don't have an issue with the way that you described my position. I don't think this is the reason why I was saying in chat.
When she did this, are you talking about this conversation right here, Dylan? Or are you talking about the conversation prior to this?
That you weren't describing my position, because
that's the timestamp. You're gonna have to go back quite a bit.
That I had with what Doe said specifically was not the fact that there was someone with a foot fetishist, or there was like someone with a foot fetish.
I think that
going out in public with
invalidated
with like a partner
Doe's stuff. I don't know.
Who was not wearing shoes. That was not the issue.
I think a reasonable person would have ended or at least de-escalated the conversation after Doe started talking graphically about CSA, not argued over whether or not shopping for child sex slaves is a sex act, lol. No, it had to do with whether or not it was relevant to the conversation. What do you mean? Wait, hold on. You understand that you... I'm sorry. I shouldn't get so upset at you because you haven't done anything weird. If that is the case, what you're saying is that everybody who's gone through something like that and or can claim that they've gone through something like that, if you're making the assumption of bad faith, which I wouldn't, but if you're running with that assumption, that is a nuke card in your pocket you can always use to shut down every single conversation. So let's say because I went through child abuse, child physical, just like I was beat as a kid, right? Whenever in a conversation about child abuse, I feel like I might be losing, I just bring up that card and try and connect it in some ramshackle way. And then if you attempt to continue the conversation, you're trying to invalidate child abuse. That is a ludicrous thing to do. Ludicrous, all right? Setting that precedent is wildly incoherent.
Itself. The point was that the partner of the person with the foot fetish knew
Isn't that like 90% of Twitch debates though? Hey, listen. I never said Twitch debates were good. Hey, listen, we're still trying to improve our shit.
The foot fetish. And
I don't think you have I don't think you've ceded your argument. I think you should just not continue debating about their personal experience. That doesn't make... Okay, hold up. I need to calm down because I'm so used to just banning people that say stupid things, or like not like banning people, but like before I was a streamer, I was so used to just never talking to people like you. I was just so used to it. Just completely, I would look you in the eyes and walk the opposite direction and forget your name. I'm sorry. That's what, at this moment, on this specific fucking topic, because I'm just so fucking done with this. RGR tried. RGR several times said, this isn't relevant. Can we move on? Can we change the subject? And then Doe did not let her.
That was the primary reason that they went shoeless in public in order to get them off. And you know that Doe agreed to that scenario, right? Like the point isn't the existence of the foot fetish. The point is the intentionally
I would assume
doing something to get your partner off in public around other people.
Yeah, I would assume if they're partners, they know about that. To me, this is a distinction without difference. Yes, I think
I'm
that's
sorry.
the
I'm going
same
too
thing.
hard on that chatter.
No,
I'm going
I don't
too
think
hard.
that's no.
I'm
because
just
in one
upset. I'm mad.
situation,
All right, I'm
you are
angry.
doing something primarily in order to get your partner off, and then the other you're not.
Sure.
I don't care.
You go barefoot because your partner likes feet. Yes.
All right, but hold on. There's a lot more there that you're skipping over, right? Like this isn't just your partner likes feet. It's your partner is sexually attracted to bare feet.
I'm sorry. I'm not. The language I'm using isn't flippant.
Hold up. Okay. Phenomenal here. I'm gonna make a call because you are being an idiot. So between you can't control me and your name isn't Tarnish. I thought it was Tarnish. I'm gonna just gonna say Tarnish. One of you two have 2 minutes to get inside of Discord, or you have to shut the fuck up. about this topic. I'm sorry. It's too far. You say, I agree, RGR tried, but I think RGR should have refused to engage with it because Doe was obviously trying to get RGR to comment on Doe's situation. How is that possible if RGR is trying to avoid it and Doe is constantly bringing it up? You dumb fuck!
Because I'm trying to weasel out of specificity. I accept these terms. Yes, they are sexually attracted to the feet. They're awkwardly shuffling to hide their boner underneath their belt loop, or whatever. Yes, sure. Fine.
Okay. And you know from watching the conversation that Doe agreed that within what they proposed, like the tweet that we were talking about, the tweet where they said that
Hello?
Hi.
All right. So I need to hear this from you. So that way my brain can hopefully stop rotting.
I think your position is totally reasonable, to be clear. I'm just saying, you're like, she is hardcore baiting for you to step on a landmine. I don't care how hard she's baiting you. You cannot step on that landmine.
The problem is the conversation would get shut down. What is her option when Doe constantly keeps bringing it back up? What is her only other option is to stop having the conversation. You understand that, right?
I do agree, although the conversation ended shortly after, so I don't know if that's actually like a huge difference was made there. But she didn't know that, to be fair, so I can't use that.
So if they constantly bring it up when you try and get away from the situation, can you then engage with it, or are you forced to just stop the conversation?
I don't know. To be fair, I don't agree with RGR's perspective, so it's hard for me to make the argument for her case. But
okay, make the argument right now. I'm saying you hate black people, right? This is you that have hated black people for your whole life, right? Yeah, you hated black people, right? You hated, well, no, just answer the question. When you were 15, you hated, and I constantly go at that for the next 20 fucking minutes, and I try and make that fucking argument, and then you keep trying to say, I don't know anything about this, and I keep trying to drill you with it, right? You should be allowed to say, no, I didn't do any of this fucking shit. This shit isn't analogous. Let's talk about the real shit that fucking matters. You should be able to fucking do that. You should be able to drill all the way fucking through that. You shouldn't have to go, well, you know what? You got me because I can't respond to half of this fucking shit, and then just leave the fucking call.
It depends on like why you're hammering me for that purpose. So from Doe's perspective, Doe is bringing up an example of something that Doe believes is a sexual act, and Riley does not, correct?
Yes.
So I think that is a legitimate thing. That is related. The issue is it's just so insanely charged you can't grapple with it. It's not disanalogous. It's poisoning the well.
The reason why it wasn't relevant to the conversation was because Riley was actively saying that that's not what she meant. That in context of that, so anybody in good faith would say, okay, perhaps my analogy is misguided relative to the individual who I am trying to question about their definition. For instance, if you claimed that it is racist to say the word the, and I was like, okay, I think that I'm just going to go ahead and say, well, what about this conversation that you had where you used the word the, right? And then you say, well, actually, in reality, when I said it's racist to use the word the, I meant this, this, and this. That was not indeed what we would typically consider to be the use of the word the, or a miscommunication. Then it's not my responsibility to go, well, you see, you did use the word the, and then you're like, well, that's not what I meant. And I say, well, you did use the word no. At that point, I am operating in bad faith. I recognize we're using two separate understandings of what you meant. And by now, the further clarification, it is my responsibility to move. So by definition, Riley was in the okay, perfectly fine and rational for doing what she did. And any other alternative would have had a shutdown of the conversation just because somebody brought up some trauma, which is wild and laughable that would ever be the case.
It's totally bullshit for Doe to do that. However, I don't think you I think basically everything else you need to disregard it and say you can't say that somebody thinking about buying you wasn't a sex act.
What's the
I think
gamer's
that's just like
ethic?
So hold on,
fucked up.
stop. You have a problem with the logic of the argument, then, not the actual or the consistency of the statements that RGR had made, not whether or not they were invalidating the CSA or whether or not they should have dropped it. You have an issue that you thought that it was pertinent to the conversation, right? And if you think that it was pertinent to the conversation, that's fine. However, making the claim that they cannot engage with the hypothetical, otherwise they have to stop interacting with the person, is wild, okay? They engage with the hypothetical because without doing so, they would have been kicked out of the conversation. There would have been no further conversation.
Okay. Irrelevant. Let's say we're having a debate and I bring up such a wildly charged type a hypothetical that is like framed in my favor, right? Every way you answer it, you understand that you're fucked, right?
Okay.
Not because of the actual logic
Sure.
of it, but
Sure.
because
Yeah.
hypothetical
The
is
optics.
bullshit.
The optics of it. Sure. Yeah.
It's the
What about
optics,
it?
or maybe like there's some kind of implicit assumption in there. Sure.
Yeah. What about it?
You can't like because of that. You don't then proceed. Well, this is bullshit, but I'm gonna walk into the trap. Like no.
So
you
your
just,
no.
you
Your
refuse.
argument. So your argument is that she walked into the trap. Mine isn't.
Yeah.
No. The argument is I would argue that's bullshit because several times she said this is not applicable, and it wasn't applicable. Because she said it wasn't applicable. So Doe thought that this was applicable because Doe thought that this was the argument RGR was making. It wasn't. So when Doe realized it wasn't, she should have, they should have implied or argued for a separate process.
Why wasn't it applicable?
It wasn't applicable because RGR didn't believe that the simple act of thinking that you might be sexually attracted to X, Y, and Z is a sex act. And I believe she's held consistent to that. It's not just thinking that something could be sex.
The trap. Saying it not doing X, Y, and Z is a sex act. That way, Doe gets to bait you into saying the person who was thinking about buying me for sex was not used doing a sex act. Now we
And
can
RGR didn't hold on. And RGR didn't engage with that until after. No, until after she had said for several times, I don't think this is analogous. I don't want to talk about this. I don't think that this is right to bring it up. I don't think that you should have brought this up. Fuck, even RGR said at one point that I think the reason why you're bringing it up is explicitly to trap me. It's explicitly to do this.
I agree.
And then she engaged with the fucking shit. Doe would not drop it. I'm sorry. Maybe you need to go. Maybe you need to go back and look at it.
Like, I 100% agree. Doe is doing insane bullshit, but you just can't engage with it. You have to use your speaking time to try to reframe it and pull it to another topic.
You can't do that. All right, you can't do that. Sometimes people will constantly bring it up, and that's what happened. RGR was consistently trying to dodge the situation because it was clearly morally loaded, and she said as much. RGR knew it was. She literally said as much that it was morally loaded, and that was probably the reason why Doe brought it up. I'm not making a claim as to whether or not that's accurate, but that's what RGR even said. She recognized that it was morally loaded and shit like that and was trying to divorce from it and trying to get away from it, but Doe didn't let her. So what are her options? Her options are to be able to engage with the hypothetical, and we can argue whether or not she engaged with it well. Her argument is to engage with the hypothetical or to do what? Stop having the conversation? She was left with no options.
Let's see what happened. The second she engaged with it, it clearly looked terrible and blew up in her face. And then the conversation pretty quickly, immediately ended after that spiraled, correct?
Yeah.
So it seems like engaging with it was a bad idea.
There was no, so what? She should have just said, okay, and we're done talking and just shut down?
If you're not, unironically, yes. If you are not going to give me a reasonable hypothetical and you are constantly morally loading it for this purpose, such that you can like yes, I think if the other person is acting in such wildly bad faith, the correct answer is to stop talking to a bad faith actor instead of walking into their booby traps. Yes.
I'm not saying that you should just stop engaging with bad faith. Or you shouldn't just stop engaging with bad faith actors. What I'm saying is that you can point out somebody's bad faith response and then address it appropriately. You could argue that RGR didn't address it appropriately. We could have that conversation. But I think no, it isn't. Because the argument is that she was capable and she is able to engage with that hypothetical. She doesn't have to drop it. The only argument that you have should be that you don't think RGR made the best arguments. That's it. Not that she shouldn't have engaged. In the chat, you consistently said that she should not have engaged with that hypothetical because it was bad faith. Right. That's bullshit. If she was going to engage with that hypothetical, she should have done it in a more smart manner. And even she recognized that it was a bad faith question.
This might feel skirting to you, but I would try to engage with the heart of it without actually discussing the hypothetical. I would try to circumnavigate it.
You'd have to give me examples of what that looks like, because every single time RGR tried to disengage, Doe kept bringing it back up. So I just don't think that's realistic. I think the most realistic thing was
Doe was crying and talking about her trauma on stream. I think at some point a conversation is such a hilarious ship show that you don't get to there isn't actually a winning move here. It's just fucked because the other person is acting in wildly bad faith. Yes.
No, it's not about whether or not there isn't a winning move here. It's not that's about.
I mean, we're advising her on what move to make, so it kind of is. Yes.
I think there was winning moves in this conversation. I 100% do. I think there was winning moves in this conversation. I think that when somebody brings up their trauma, you shouldn't just shut down conversations because you can't get around it. I don't think that's a good precedent to set, because everybody who has trauma can load that nuke in the fucking tubes, and as soon as they feel like a conversation is going downhill, they just weaponize it and there's nothing you can do. I think setting the precedent that you just have to give up there is shitty. And I understand what you're saying from an optical position or what have you, but I think it's a part of my... Hold on, let me get this off. I think it is a part of my responsibility as a streamer to suss out that bullshit optical nonsense and say, yeah, it may look optically bad, but that's what this person is actively trying to do. I think that we shouldn't just be like, well, you know what? Somebody brought up their past childhood trauma, nothing I can do, end the conversation. You played the nuke.
I don't think a nuke to end the conversation is as overpowered and needs to be nerfed as much as you think it does. There currently exist nukes that end the conversation. One of them is screaming the N-word into the microphone. Now, it actually doesn't make you look as good as you think it does, even though it ends the conversation. It actually kind of turns people against you. So the actual thing you need to do is point out that what they're doing is nuking the conversation, and what they're doing is hilariously bad faith. And
that's what RGR did.
Yes.
And that is literally what RGR did. Right? You realize that, right?
I think
there is no contesting that. That is an objective claim. She literally had a back and forth with Doe where she said explicitly to Doe's face, I feel the reason why you are bringing this up is to shut down this conversation. That is what RGR said with her fucking chest. I don't know what to tell you. And then the argument that you're making is exactly that. So I will not blame somebody for continuing a conversation into that. It is my responsibility, I would argue, to make everybody know that who is watching that interaction, right, that RGR is not massively out of line for continuing that. She recognized that there was a massive nuke being played and that bad faith was occurring and what have you. And it is my responsibility to educate everybody possible that them navigating that conversation further instead of just saying, well, you played a nuke, I have to give up, is incredibly important, because otherwise, on precedent, everybody would have to end a conversation when trauma is brought up. And I find that to be ridiculous.
I think the precedent that would be set would everyone would see that bringing up that trauma is an illegitimate move. That would be the actual precedent.
No, it wouldn't. No, it would. If you ended the conversation, if every time somebody brought up childhood trauma, you just went, okay, well, I got to be done here. I don't think that there would have been.
Point out that it's bad, and then you end the conversation.
What do you mean? So you're trying to say that you need to end the conversation every single time that somebody brings up childhood trauma. It's just you gotta hold on. You just gotta you just gotta make sure that everybody knows that you think it's bad faith, and then that's it. And then that gives them carte blanche to be able to. You realize you're giving them a get out of jail free card every single time. You just gotta say it's bad faith. And then you know what? Hold on. And do you know what they say? They say, look, they ran from an extreme hypothetical. They ran from an analogy that they felt uncomfortable with. When pressed with a real-world scenario, that pussy ran. That's what they say about you. And you look like a spineless little hack fuck that ran as soon as ass met grass. That's like you're trying to make an argument for optics here, but it's just not going to fucking sit.
I think that is a really good counterpoint that they would point out that you ran. I think that you might be right there. But I still think the way that turned out, you can't say that ended well for RGR.
I don't think it ended well for RGR. I think I agree that she did kind of walk into a bit of the trap there, but I disagree with anybody's painting of the narrative that she was downplaying Doe's trauma.
Okay, to be clear, I did not say that.
I know you didn't. I know you didn't. The reason why I'm up at arms about this, though, is because I don't like that implication, or directly what Vaush said, is that explicit narrative that is being pushed. I think her engagement with that topic could absolutely be seen as necessary to be able to get out of a bad faith hypothetical. I think that is, or an analogy being drawn. I think that is a perfectly...
Well, I think by engaging with it, you directly allow Vaush to make that point. Like let's just walk through that, right?
I don't disagree with that being the case. But again, it's the responsibility of people that are unironically more fucking understanding of bad faith here, which is surprising from the guy that labels everybody fucking this, that, and otherwise, to be able to make the argument that he is out of line. That is a responsibility, instead of just shutting down every conversation when trauma is brought up, and relating this to other scenarios where Vaush himself hasn't shut down conversations when trauma is brought up. And I can reference that. It is my responsibility to set that line straight. Bad faith actors will always be bad faith, right? And I don't think it is appropriate to be able to say, well, you know what? Every single bad faith actor never be able to comment on any of the shit that they do. I agree that we should be better about engaging with bad faith actors, but in the case where somebody fucks up against a bad faith actor or a bad faith tactic, it is our moral obligation. An obligation to be able to set the facts straight and make sure we don't fall into the exact fucking line of logic that the bad faith operator wants us to believe. That RGR was mitigating the fucking the problems that occurred with Doe's childhood. That is something we have a moral obligation to avoid. And that's my main critique, at least in regard to this.
I would say Vaush and Doe would be the only ones who broke any kind of moral obligation. All I'm saying is RGR crossed the road without looking both ways. It's that kind of violation.
Sure,
it's
but I don't. Sure, yeah. I think perhaps we don't disagree now on this one. We have come to an understanding, I believe.
Okay.
Okay.
Make sure to yell at me when I say more dumb shit.
Yeah, I'll be sure to. Thank you for getting in Discord, buddy. I appreciate it quite greatly. All right.
Thank you very much.
All right. You have a good one. See ya.
You too.